So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rental Sphere. As I mentioned, I'm honored that Elise Leroux, the MD of Expello, has joined us this morning to talk about how we can protect landlords in this current market. And what happened was there were a few articles that caught my attention about changes in the rental market. And they were essentially based on the most recent statistics that have been released, which is Q4 for last year. So they're about 2 months old. But as we know, statistics are always a little bit historical, and they try and predict where things are going. Of course, we have our own more updated experiences, which you need to then meld into the statistical information. Oops, what's going on with my tongue this morning? So this morning I thought we'd go through the market trends and the risks that seem to be apparent for landlords. And these risks, in terms of managing these risks, I want to talk about some important points when it comes to the tenant vetting and the re-vetting of tenants. Tenant vetting is obviously our biggest risk avoidance technique, but the reality is life happens. So it's not the catch-all. It only catches things that are apparent at the time of the application. But then, of course, one will need to manage the lease going forward. So then we'll talk about some application vetting tips, some renewals and re-vetting. We've just recently updated our renewals checklist it's almost updated. I go round and round in circles with it to take into account some re-vetting things and a few other things that we'll talk about. Then we'll talk about how to speak to landlords and how to warn landlords about the risks and how to explain to them, because landlords often think that, well, if we've vetted the tenant, then it's almost like a guarantee. But of course, rentals is real life. And in real life, there are no real guarantees. The reality is life changes, life happens. And that's often beyond the control of anybody. Or beyond the control of the individuals themselves. And they simply have to adapt to those changes. And us and the landlords being the individuals that may be affected. Somebody loses their job, that sort of thing. We know that things happen. And then we'll talk about the role of Expello in risk mitigation and why it makes sense, and I believe is almost incumbent on us that if we know of, as the rental professional, if we know of a solution or a risk mitigation product that one can offer the landlords, I think it's very good, and it's part of our responsibilities to offer that to landlords if they want it. It's not a hard sell or anything like that. It's simply, having a discussion with them and figuring out whether they are, for example, dependent on their rental income. And if they are dependent on their rental income and they need that rental income, or they would crash if they don't have that rental income for an extended period of time, then I think we need to offer, or we should offer them options if those options are available. And of course, then we will take questions and answers as we go through. So let's get going and let's look at the most recent stats. I'm not going to take a long time on these. One of the stats that stands out at the moment is that the rental growth in South Africa has gone up, and it's now 5.2% year on year. This is, in other words, in December of 2023 versus 2024 versus December of 2023, rentals had gone up by 5.2%. And if you have a look at this graph, you will see that this is the highest rental increase for a long, long time, if we're looking at year-on-year figures. And in fact, they've gone back into the stats, and so the rental increase has been the highest since December 2017, the highest since 2017. And then if we have a look, it's about 2.4% above inflation, which is quite significant. We know that we've been knocked, or consumers, okay? Tenants are consumers. are already being hit hard by inflation, and this is another 2.5% on top of that. And as a result of this, the report very clearly recommends that we need to do thorough affordability assessments to ensure tenants can keep up with the escalating costs and living costs. Now, when we look at this, I think from a landlord's perspective, immediately there's an excitement. The excitement is rents have gone up. Wow, I'm going to get more income. But there's a dark side to that silver lining. There's a dark cloud behind that silver lining. And the dark cloud is the fact that I think we all know, and I think we've all experienced this in the last year or two. People are more and more under financial pressure. They are seriously under a lot of financial pressure. And now to add a 5.2% rent increase onto that simply puts them under more pressure. And we're going to look at some of the stats there as well when we go through. But so that I think is the first standout. By the way, I'm looking here at the national figures. Obviously, I can't deal with all the provinces. But if you go and download the PayProp report, you'll see it has information in from the various provinces. So that's the first standout figure, which on the face of it seems to be a really, really positive thing. But behind the scenes, it might be causing more pressure on people. There are, of course, provinces that are higher than that because that's simply the average. Now, if you have a look here, you'll see the quarterly trends. And you will see that it is certainly the highest for a very, very long time. So it's been climbing quite steeply, if you have a look here, since about the low in Q3 of 2021. But this is the highest figure that has been achieved since 2017, according to this report. In line with that, or hand in hand with that, the average rental is now at an all-time high. The highest it's been, and that's the average rental in the country is now 9,051 Rand per month. This brings about, as I mentioned, increasing tenant affordability concerns. The other concern here is the rising arrears and vacancy risks. If people can't afford, or people have been having problems, they are going to potentially fall into arrears because they're more and more under financial pressure. And of course, if they can't afford the rentals, then we have vacancy issues. And part of the report also has some other stats in it where it shows how the rental brackets have changed because people have crept in the rental brackets because of these sorts of figures. So once again, it emphasizes the fact that we need to have stronger vetting and very, very proactive lease/arrears management processes. One of the things with arrears or breach management is the fact that we need to take action as soon as possible while the problem is still of a manageable size to correct. And I think that's an important factor, and that in times like this where things are going up, where people are getting, because everything's going up, and people are getting financially put under more and more pressure, we need to be very, very diligent. And we need to monitor. We need to monitor people's credit history. So, for example, if you use TPN, for example, I don't know about all the other ones, but if you use TPN, you can opt for a consistent monitoring, and you will be told when something is changing. Alternatively, when I'm talking about monitoring, I'm talking about things like if a tenant was a wonderful paying tenant, and all of a sudden things start getting late, or there's a problem with rent payments being on time or being complete, or that maybe they paid in batches or they paid in different payments, then I think it's incumbent on us as the professionals, given the service that we offer, to do things like saying, has something changed? And if your application form allows for you, and it should allow for you, to be able to get updated information at any point in time, then you can go and you can do a new check and say, has something changed? And you may be able to see that something has changed. Maybe they've bought something new, or maybe their employment has changed, or maybe something like that has happened. These things happen. And these things don't happen to people because they ask for them to happen. These are things that often happen that we simply have to manage as part of our responsibilities. And if necessary, speak to the landlord about an intervention. So if somebody's income's gone down or their income has stopped for some or other reason, maybe one talks about letting them out of the lease without a cancellation penalty to be able to re-tenant the property, or those sorts of options. I think we have to keep our minds open. So I think those are the important points there. So why is tenant vetting and re-vetting so critical in this particular process? There's a number of reasons. Obviously, the obvious one is affordability. Affordability. Ensuring also the financial stability of the tenants in terms of their rental payments, because obviously we look at it from the perspective of our landlord who has come to us to ask us to take on certain responsibilities and to attend to certain matters for them. One of them is to ensure that the rent gets paid. It's not the only responsibility we have. To be honest, by far, it's not the only responsibility. But together with that responsibility is the matter of taking corrective action when needed. So looking at identifying risks. So when we see somebody's payment frequency, payment amounts, whatever, sort of changes, and it's unusual because this person's, let's say, been with us for, or been renting through us for 18 months or something like that, and you just haven't had these problems before, then it's not, one can start looking at things, but you need to look at your rental application form and make sure that you have the authority to do these checks. And it's not, some people think it's delving into people's personal stuff. It's not. It's part of the role we do. Our role is very personal, and we are shared with lots of personal information, or lots of personal information is shared with us, which is exactly why we fall under the POPI Act, and we have to be really, really cautious of what gets done with that information. So in the end, through these processes, we want to, and I've used the word specifically here, reduce the chances of arrears and, worst case scenario, potential evictions. We can only reduce. We can never eliminate. I'm going to say it again, life happens. People don't ask for these things to happen to them. People don't necessarily cause things to happen to them. Things happen, and we all know that. I mean, I know everybody's a bit tired of COVID, but COVID was an ideal example of where things happen that are beyond our control, and all we can really do is react within the confines of the market forces out there. And I think that's exactly what we need to do now. When a market changes like this, we need to bring out a different skill set. And then in the end, one of our roles, we have a fiduciary responsibility in terms of this contract called the mandate. The mandate gives us authority, but it gives us responsibility. Authority to act as the landlord in the tasks and in the functions that have been delegated to us or we've been authorized to do, in which case we fit into the definition, or we are included in the definition of a landlord in terms of the Rental Housing Act. So certain of those functions or certain of those responsibilities are delegated to us, but together with that, we are authorized and we have a responsibility to act. So let's talk a little bit about, now, in the time we have, we don't have that much time that we can go into detail here, but we do have detailed training on most of these aspects, and especially on vetting and on re-tenanting. Point number one, you can only check the information that you get. So please make sure that your rental application form includes all the information that you need to paint a picture for the landlord. That's the way I see application vetting. Yes, it's a credit check. Yes, it's all these things. But essentially what we're doing is, out of all the information in that application form, We are painting a picture for the landlords. It's almost like paint by numbers, but I don't know if younger people know what that is. When we were young and we didn't have TV, we had this thing called paint by numbers. So it's almost like that. We are sketching, we are giving the landlord a glimpse, painting a picture of who this tenant or group of tenants are that are applying for this property. And that includes affordability. That includes credit history, but it also includes number of people. It includes the relationship to one another. It includes feedback from their landlord, and not just their current landlord, because their current landlord, ladies and gentlemen, may have a reason to want to get rid of them, or would be happy for them to move or to transition, let's call it that. So it could be that they don't tell you the full truth. So make sure you get all the information. Make sure you check all of that information. Oops, and I have a spelling error. Also make sure that you cross-check information. So if you are getting, for example, a pay slip, don't accept it on face value. Cross-check it with the bank statement, so that you have a way of confirming that both of those things are in alignment. There's various other things that we can cross-check, but that's just a simple example. As I said, current landlord, of course we want to contact the current landlord, but go one further back, because the person who's one further back may tell you something different from what the current landlord's telling you, because they've got nothing to win or lose by being totally frank and honest for you. So make sure you have those adaptations in your rental application form. Now let's pause for a moment at this thing called fraudulent application documentation. I recently bumped into a business owner who owns a rental management company, a large one. And they've been monitoring fraudulent application documents. And the statistics that they have come up with are rather shocking. According to their stats, 1 in 4 rental applications, 1 in 4, 25% of rental applications were submitted with fraudulent documentation. Now, I say fraudulent, I don't know if that's the real legal word, something that has been altered, not the truth, maybe a wish list, however you want to term it, but something in that application, in terms of the documentation, has not been as it seemed, or it did not look the same that when it came to the agent as what it did when it left the source. So we've really got to be careful. And this is where this cross-checking becomes really, really important. But I think we need to go a step further than cross-checking. We need to almost make it standard, mandatory, that we look at things like there's products available where you can get a verified bank statement directly from the source. Directly from the source. So it can't be altered. So there's those sorts of solutions out there that are available. Make use of them. In the current climate, when you speak to landlords, you can use this also, of course, when you're trying to sign up new landlords, when you're trying to onboard new landlords, when you're trying to sign mandates with new landlords. Landlords don't understand how rife this is. 1 out of 4 applications, ladies and gentlemen, so only stats I'm aware of, that's been monitored, 1 out of 4 applications, and I'm sure, obviously, that's an average, but I'm sure that that can differ from area to area. So maybe start looking at these sorts of statistics. Now, that's, of course, at the initial stage of the onboarding of the tenant, when the tenant approaches us for the first time to rent a rental property. We do all of this vetting. But, sorry, just to go back to that previous slide. The other thing that we need to do is we need to have some form of consistent monitoring. Given the climate at the moment, I think it is absolutely imperative upon us that we need to have some form of ongoing monitoring, because life is changing and people are being put under a lot more pressure. And I think we all feel that. I mean, we talk about tenants, etc., but it's just normal consumers. It's just a subset of normal consumers who happen to rent a property instead of owning a property or staying with somebody else. When we get to renewal and re-vetting, I have found in my experience, and I haven't spoken to everybody, of course, but in my experience, there's a number of key factors that I don't think are always taken into account or the landlord is always briefed on. So let's talk about these matters. And Elise can come in at any point in time if she wants to add to these, because, well, Elise might sum up once I hand over to her, because Elise deals with the dark side. Sorry to say, the dark side, when things go wrong. And I think Elise has also picked up a lot of these matters. We talk quite often about these things. So it is real, and it is real problems. If a tenant is in breach, I believe our responsibility is to advise the landlord not to sign a fixed term renewal. To advise the landlord not to sign a fixed term renewal. And I'm talking about breach in the broader sense. We're not only talking about non-payment or late payment or arrears. We are talking about any forms of breaches. Why do I say that? Well, I suppose simplistically, in plain English, it comes down to the fact that if somebody has already shown you the way they are, and it's not working for you, it's not the way you want it to be, carrying on with that relationship and expecting something to change is a little bit crazy, I suppose. According to Einstein, or supposedly Einstein, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, they say. I don't know if he really said that, but it's true. If you do the same thing, you're going to get the same result. So if they've been doing something and we continue with it, I don't think the situation is going to get better. To be honest, because financial pressure seems to be escalating, in all probability, the situation is probably going to get worse. So I would always advise, and this is what we've just adapted and had some more email templates come out with our renewal process documentation, is that we advise the landlord to terminate the lease. I think that is what I would advise. Sometimes it might be a glitch, or we believe it's a glitch, or the tenant has communicated to us it's a glitch, or the landlord may want to be more lenient. In that case, my fallback position would be, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, in that case, I hear where you're coming from. But what we can then do, and I believe, well, this is the best solution I've come up with, is to say to the tenants, given the current situation, we simply cannot offer you another fixed term lease agreement. What we are willing to do is we are willing to offer you a month-to-month extension for 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, review the situation. And if it has been corrected, we can then consider a fixed term renewal. It's almost like a holding pattern, is the way I'd explain it. So that would be what I would then do. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm explaining myself well enough. The other thing is, given the fact that inflation is up by 3%, rentals are going up by 5.2%, salaries are not keeping track with that. Salaries are not keeping track with that. I think it's incumbent on us that when we are offering a renewal and we're talking about a rent increase, at the beginning of the lease, we are so fastidious about affordability, etc. Yet when we get to a renewal, often that just becomes less important. And I know we've seen how the tenant has performed, but I think it's important for us to say, given the new rental, let's get updated information from the tenants about their income, how their situation has changed, and let's redo the affordability. Let's have a look now at their credit, for example. Has something changed? Warning signs would be where people are all of a sudden have started taking out a lot of short-term loans. And you may not in that case say to the landlord, well, I don't think we should renew. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I'd once again maybe go into a holding pattern for 6 months. We will renew on a month-to-month basis, and we will leave it for 6 months, and we will then reconsider a long-term renewal. Now, sorry, why I didn't explain why I say that. Why month-to-month versus fixed term? For a very simple reason, really. If you are in a fixed term and the breach worsens or the breach continues, the only way of dealing with a breach, in most cases, if it falls under Section 14 of the CPA, the only way to deal with that breach is to put the tenant on notice, a letter of demand that they rectify the breach. That's why it's called a demand. Lawyers like demanding. And giving them 20 business days to rectify that breach, failing which the landlord can cancel the lease. So we're already into month 2 by the time the landlord can cancel the lease. Now, when they cancel the lease, they used to be able to cancel the lease with immediate, saying vacate immediately. I know in the Western Cape, and Elise can update us about the rest of the country, but in the Western Cape, you can't do that anymore. You have to give them a calendar month's notice to vacate. So we're talking about 20 business days. We're already in month number 2. So we're in the middle of month number 2. 2 rent payments have been missed. This is if it's not been corrected. Yeah? If it has been corrected, then that changes. Well, if it has been corrected, then there's no issue anymore, except a little bit of nervousness. So we're in month 2, so we're 2 rent payments behind by the time we can cancel. Now we've got to give a calendar month's notice, at least in the Western Cape. So that means month number 3. So by the time we can legally expect them to be out or legally give them notice, they are 3 months in arrears if the problem hasn't been rectified. And so that's why I think it's so important. Now, so that's in the case of a fixed term lease. In the case of a month-to-month lease, you can at any point in time, firstly, the breach notice is only 7 days. And you can also give a calendar month's notice at any point in time. So given that everything works according to the law, the landlord will be able to get the property vacated and re-tenanted a lot quicker to restore their income that they are so desperately in need of. So I think that's a very, very important strategy to bear in mind. And of course, I know people are more under pressure. I know people, of course, that's immediately what people say to me is, but people don't have money. I understand that. But as a rental agent, I'm employed by the landlord to mitigate their risks, to protect them as much as possible. And one of the biggest protections that are offered in terms of lease and in terms of rental housing and legislation in this country is the deposit. Because that deposit is the tenant's money held as security for the landlord. And the landlord at the end of the lease has rights to use that deposit without asking for permission, without getting quotes, without anything for to cover specified things, including arrears, including repair of damages, including early cancellation penalty. So it's very, very important that we make sure that the top-up deposits are paid. In fact, if we follow our process that we propose, we bill the tenant for these costs upfront, and only when they've paid them do we then sort out the documentation. So any agreement that's reached in terms of negotiation is always dependent on the payment of the deposit and the signing of the new agreement. It's as simple as that. And well, I try and keep it as simple as that. I know it's hard, but I think it's part of our responsibilities. I simply don't think that we can abdicate from those. Now, talking about tenant arrears, one of the concerns that's pointed out in the pay-prop report is that an increase of arrears, you'll see here that the arrears started to turn as we were headed into quarter 4. It started to turn. 17.1% of tenants are now in arrears. 17.1% are now in arrears. The average amount of arrears is 77% of the rental. So that is what's gone up. The amount of arrears has gone up. The number has gone slightly down, 0.3%. The percentage of tenants in arrears has gone slightly down, okay? But the amount of arrears has increased slightly. So there's a concern based on these figures that if it continues, we will be in a situation where an increase in arrears could be a sign. So I think it's very important that we take immediate action when there's arrears. So now if we have a look at income and spending, and this shows how people are getting squashed. Okay, squashed, maybe that's not the right word. Eh? How people are getting put under more and more pressure. You'll see, on average, the people who rent, 44.1%, it's almost half their income is going towards servicing debt. 27.2% is what, 28.7%, that's almost the maximum of 33% now, is going, towards rent. And their disposable income has only been left on average at a quarter of what they earn. The money that they can freely spend on the things that they like and don't need to, that's really what we're talking about, has changed over the time. If we look at spending and the ongoing impact of high interest rates and inflation, we can see that in terms of high risk, 25%, a quarter of the applicants that we can expect that 1 out of 4 applicants that we get will potentially be high risk. And ladies and gentlemen, that gets us off the statistical. So let's talk about how we speak to landlords about this. And this will be at the time of onboarding and at the time of renewing. I think the conversations are very much the same. As professionals, we should be able to simply talk about the real market situations. The fact that rents are now at their highest level, that there's been the highest increase in year-to-year rental since 2017. The fact that the amount of arrears has started creeping up. Those sorts of talks we should be able to have. You can share articles. There's many articles on this on the internet. Find those links and share them in landlord newsletters. Speak to landlords about how on the plus side, it seems positive they're going to get more income, but we have to realize that people are under more pressure. So we may be looking at more defaults, etc. I think it's important for landlords to know that. Make sure that your lease agreement and your policies in terms of arrears, etc., are structured, are implemented vigorously, and we make provision that the lease makes, things like, for example, if there's a problem at renewal time, you don't offer a fixed term renewal, you offer a month-to-month renewal with a review after 6 months, those sorts of things. Scripts and conversation starters. When we are speaking to landlords, for example, about renewing, make sure that we explain to them that when they do the marketing, initially when they do the marketing, when we are vetting, when we are renewing, when we are doing rental increases or proposing rental increases, and when we are looking at arrears management, the steps that we take, that our landlords understand the steps that we take, our responsibilities and our obligations, our commitments in this regard, but they also understand that we don't operate in a vacuum. We operate in a market. And those 3 things that I mentioned just now, the 5.2% highest increase since 2017, the 905 average rental has just gone over 9,000 Rand for the first time, and the fact that the arrears has increased up to about 3/4 of monthly rental on average, and about 17%, 1 out of 5 tenants almost, are in arrears. It's about 1 out of 6 tenants, which is about, something like that, 15%. I think so. It's between 1 out of 6 and 1 out of 5 tenants are in arrears. Make sure that we discuss those things with them. Don't just throw numbers. I mean, just speak normal language. I mean, people understand that. I think we all understand that we're under more financial pressure. And I think it's important that we then say, look, this is the situation. This is how we feel. This is our recommendation. This is our knowledge. This is our experience of what happens in these sorts of times. But you're not alone. We can look at a proactive solution. And that's where we look at things like Expeller, which is a proactive solution that we prepare ourselves for the time that we may need to offer them a solution. But you offer them the solution up front, and then the solution is available to them. And Elise, that is where I'm going to hand over to you. If you have any comments on what I've just said, you're more than welcome to add them.
Morning, Sean. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity, and morning to everyone. I always learn something new in the sessions with you. Of course, there was just one thing that I wanted to mention when we were discussing the making the decision to not renew on a fixed term, but allowing it to go on a month to month. Yes, it has an impact on the bridge process. But what I've seen often is tenants actually then do, they make the payments on time. But then they start behaving badly. And I think the big difference is, remember, in a fixed term, a landlord can only cancel if there's a material breach. Where it's on a month to month, they can give a month's notice and they don't even have to have a reason. So yeah. I think even if a tenant is starting to act out, especially if the two of them are on the same property, if there's a behavioral thing and you see it starting to escalate, don't renew on a fixed term. Rather, and you can still earn your renewal commission, you can still earn money from it to say you're monitoring it. But I see too many times we cannot cancel the lease agreement because the tenant is rude. Okay, so I think that is one of the things that we really see. We've seen an increase in breaches. So Expeller, for those who don't know, we are in a breach management and eviction solution nationwide. So we deal with breaches the whole of South Africa, and we have seen a significant increase in breaches. We've seen a significant increase in recurring breaches. And what I mean by that is people default this month, then next month they default again. So they remedy, and if they remedy, we can't cancel, but then they default again. And usually it escalates. This tells me exactly what Sean is saying, that the market is having a difficulty. The people aren't able to afford. We are having the conversations with the tenants. That's part of our solution we offer. Managing the process, having the conversations, and we have a 98% success rate, even with the increased breaches that we are dealing with, getting tenants to remedy or vacate. I have to say, what is important for us is to ensure that we get involved when the dispute begins. Because if we get involved too late, the emotions are super high. Guys, I've done in the past, I did divorces, and a messy divorce is very high strung. Now imagine that times 20. I think I don't have to explain it to you. It's difficult to negotiate with a tenant that's already very upset, that's frustrated, a landlord. Everybody's just high strung. So we say, let's handle it. We take the emotion away and we solve the problems. We have the conversations with the tenants to say, why is this increasing? How can we help? And I think that approach, yes, I know agents are amazing. They have the conversations, but it feels to me tenants don't really listen to agents all the time. Also, because we come from an independent way, remember, we don't have a relationship with the tenant. We want you to be in a space that if you have to go back to the property to do the outgoing inspection, that you don't have to fear your life or hate the guy that you almost have to drink a bottle of wine before going there. Exaggerating a bit, but I think that is something that is important. So, Sean, I think also what we've seen with vetting, I love the fact that you put so much emphasis on the bank statements. Expeller accepts, we rely on agents vetting, and the affordability is the most important part for us, not the credit report. And we are seeing people are not taking the time to look at the pay slips and the bank statements. And there was actually a question, Sean, you see, I answered it in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to expand on that when we get to the Q&A portion.
Oh, sorry. So I'm jumping.
No, that's fine.
But what we've seen also in the breaches is actually how many agents say to me, Elise, we knew there's going to be a problem, but I ignored it and we placed the tenant. Please don't do that. Trust yourself. You're not losing out on a commission. You're going to place a better tenant and you're going to get better return. So please listen to that. If you're not, this is why these trainings are so important, because we deal with so many things. We want to prevent, Expeller wants to prevent loss of income. And I think for a fixed fee of 250 Rand a month, the landlord we can save them the cost of an eviction. So just to say, Sean, the horrible part is an eviction in the past would have taken about 4 months, 3 months to get your order, and then an additional month the courts usually allow them to vacate. We are looking, the courts are so congested. We are getting court dates 4 months from now. So Expeller's really upping their game to try and get these people to vacate voluntarily. And what I say by that is we friendly, we encourage them by arranging moving trucks, see what are solutions we can offer to get them to voluntarily vacate. Everything legal, we try to prevent an eviction. If we can't, we will pay the whole eviction. We have a panel of 27 attorneys that will do the eviction and they're going to run with it. So we try and prevent it, not because we want to save money, but because we want to save time for the landlord. It's a time period where the landlord is not getting money. So I think that is very valuable. And that's what the Expeller services actually offer, to say we will firstly try and prevent, then manage the eviction process, and we will pay all the legal fees for the eviction.
Is that okay? So sorry, can I share my screen quickly?
Yes, you can.
Oh, you didn't share a screen?
No, I didn't share a screen.
Oh, I noticed now. Okay, so I've just shared my screen. Firstly, before that, let's just talk about the point that there was a question on that you responded to, and I agree with you fully. I also know that the number of tenants or applicants, let's call it that, who are applying for a rental property that say to you, I will not give you my bank statements, is probably increased since Poppy came into it, because people think that Poppy means they can refuse to give us personal information. It's not the ROPI Act. It's not the Refusal of Personal Information Act. It's not a ROPI. It is Poppy. It is the Protection of Personal Information Act. We, as service providers, can insist on the information that we need to help our clients or to do the job that we have been called upon or are required to do on behalf of our clients. So you are fully within your rights to say no bank statement, no processing. No bank statement, I don't start. And I've got one of those letters in our process documentation where it says we don't have all the supporting documentation. Please note we cannot proceed. We will continue taking applications, because that, unfortunately, is the cold, hard facts of it. I need, and I'm quite happy to justify this if I get taken somewhere. I need 1 out of 4 applications are fraudulent. I need cross-checking information. It would be irresponsible of me to say, oh, don't worry about your bank statement. In addition to that, we are also an accountable institution under FICA. FICA says part of our responsibilities, and this is in terms of landlords and tenants, is to determine their source of income. How do you determine their source of income? How do you do a risk analysis on them? By looking at their bank statements, because that's where income goes normally. If they're lucky and they put it in their pocket, then obviously they're going to fly under our radar. But then there ain't going to be enough money in the bank statements. I've got to have something to protect me. I've got to have something to protect my landlord. If I don't do a bank statement, I don't do the cross-checking, okay? And the landlord, and there's a problem. Potentially the landlord could say, I didn't do my job properly. So be very, very cautious of being led by these things. It's a red herring. It's to try and put you off. The reality is we have a duty under POPI to protect that information, but we also have the right under POPI to require, to make it mandatory. There is absolutely no value to them saying, or no, I don't know how to put it. The reality is, yes, they can say, we're not giving you the bank statement, and we can say we're not then processing the application. The easiest way to say that is under FICA. Okay, FICA requires us to do this, and we have to determine this before we can enter into a business relationship with you. A lease is a business relationship. So if I don't do this, then I'm in breach of FICA, and I'm not prepared to risk my reputation, my company standing with the FIC on the basis of you not wanting to share your bank statement. So that's one point. Oh, sorry, that's elaboration of that point. Sorry, Elise.
No, I just wanted to add, I think one thing we should remember, if they arrive, they must probably have a car. You can't get the car without the bank statements. So why, if the bank, Vodacom, any institute where they apply, even if for Woolworths, they ask for the documents they supply, why are they not for something as important as rentals refusing? And I would clearly say, listen, we would rather get somebody that's wanting this, because clearly you're hiding something. If they want the assurance to say, listen, we're not going to share it with, sell the information, I don't know who you want to sell it to. I mean, that's a different thing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just to go where I was going before I went that. No, that's an important point. When I was talking, I was going to mention that, and I thought, no, don't take more time than what you already are taking of people. But I'm glad it came up, so thank you for that question. If you go to rentalsphere.coza/expello, and that's expello with the expello, not ex. It's not like your ex-husband, your ex-wife, your ex-girlfriend, your ex-boyfriend. You've dropped half of them, it's only an X now. So if you get rid of them, you then go to Expello, it's X, just with an X. You will see there is a summary of everything that is included. And at the bottom here, ladies and gentlemen, oh, you know why this is happening? It's because, sorry, at the bottom there is a form for you to fill in. I don't know what's going on here now. There is a form. I checked it just now. I think this is because I'm logged in as me. So importantly, if you click on any of these, it should take you in any case to the form that, that you can fill in. Just to highlight a few things here quickly. I know this is probably a little bit on the edge now, and a little bit dangerous of me to say, but in a traditional eviction, often the legal people are only called in once the cancellation has been done. They're only called in then. And by then, it could be that the cancellation was done incorrectly, LODs. It could be there was a fault with the LOD, and they have to go all the way back. They're normally going 2 months back. So by doing that, we're already adding a 2-month process to those 4 months that Elise has already talked about. And the landlord can potentially hold us liable for that delay and any losses as a result of that delay. So that's really important. Expello gets CC'd on the letter of demand, and they take over that process for you from 7 days after the letter of demand, if the letter of demand has not yet been satisfied. Whereas lawyers will only be called normally right at the end. I personally believe that a cancellation letter, even if you're not using Expello, should always be drawn up by a lawyer just to make 100% sure. But not everybody's in agreement with me, and a lot of people pay for those additional times because of that. With a traditional eviction, as far as I'm concerned, nobody wins. The tenant doesn't win. The landlord doesn't really win. Okay, it's a lose-lose situation. It's actually a lose-lose-lose situation because the agent's not getting paid in the whole process at that time. The only people that win, and I say this slightly facetiously, are the lawyers. Honestly, I'm sorry, it is true. It is true. The only people that win are the lawyers. Everybody else loses. Another thing with Expello, as Elise mentioned to you, Expello is $250 a month. Members of our training club get discount. So if you're in our training club, just note it in when you make your inquiry. They get a discounted fee. The reality is, though, that Expello has a monthly subscription. It's not an insurance product, by the way. It's a members club, we could really say. They have a monthly subscription. When something goes awry, Elise and her business partners pay for the legal costs if needed. They pay for the legal costs out of their income if needed, okay? The lawyers don't work for them for free. So it's in their best interest to not, and I'm putting it rather bluntly, Elise, but it's the truth of the matter. Their interests are aligned with the landlord's interests. They would rather get the tenants out of there voluntarily, and even if there's two sets of inverted commas, they would rather negotiate an amicable solution so the tenants vacate voluntarily without needing the eviction process, because Elise and them save on average 40,000 Rand in that particular process, at least. Okay, at least. And the landlord, because of their motivation, 98% of the times, by the way, they get that result. And that's why I like Expello so much. So they will then save that money, but the landlords will get the income. You were just talking about 4 to 6 months. 4 to 6 months earlier, they will start getting the income. And that's the best possible result. They will get a new income from a new tenant. They can re-tenant. And I think that's a huge, huge plus there. And they get involved right at the start. The other thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to be cautious. We are not legal experts. We are not eviction experts. We are not. We are not. So letter of demands is normally where our role should end in the process. I've always explained to landlords that after that, it has legal ramifications. To be honest, the letter of demand already has legal ramifications. But you've CC'd Elise and her team if your landlord is an Expello client. You've CC'd Elise and her team, and they check those letters of demand. So if there's a problem with those letters of demand, they are going to tell you immediately. So you're going to lose maybe 1 or 2 days. That's about it. Not getting 2 months down the line, because that's what it takes. Yeah? What it takes when you know that somebody has now become an illegal occupant. 2 months down the line, 2 more months of arrears for the landlord. Or not, arrears, losses for the landlord. Elise and them have also been very, very creative. And Elise, you might talk to some of these examples. Elise tries to help the tenants as much as possible to facilitate their transition to a new abode. Elise, would you like to expand on any of these?
Yes, Sean, we really go all about, that's why I say we are problem solvers. So, I mean, we had instances, and I love the specialized care, because, I mean, that was very unique, where we had a tenant leaving his mother in the unit, and he really just said, well, I don't have the transport to take her to frail care. We arranged all of that. We had at our cost. Because whether we pay the attorney or whether we pay this, at the end of the day, we really go and see, okay, what is going to be the best result? And we take those things. I mean, sometimes the tenants are really stubborn and we don't like it. But we tell the tenant, the moment you hand over the key to the agent and the property is empty, you will get a beep beep confirming the payment that we've offered you to help you with your move. And that's as much as possible that we share.
I just realized that somehow on my page I've got a whole lot of blue. I will go and fix that. I didn't seem to have that this morning. So I don't know what's happened, but I will fix it. But the reality is it's all there. They also have a good faith certificate. You do, hey?
Yes. Can I share a bit about that? And it's also going to hand up with this. So most landlords do pay for Expello when you have the mandate. And I know this is a difficult conversation to have, saying, hello, landlord, I'm going to get you the best tenant ever. Oh, by the way, if they default, we have a plan B. Please don't look at it that way. As Sean said before, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And having a plan B is better than having nothing at all. So I think as an agent, you should never be wary. It shows your experience, knowing that what's happening in the market and being prepared by making something available to the landlord. So what we say is landlord, offer it in your mandate to the landlord. The services are available and it usually gets paid from the rent collected. However, coming to the good faith certificate, what we've seen is there's an increase of tenants that is maybe their credit report is medium. We see a lot of them, but they are good tenants. So how do you then go to your landlord? Rather go to your tenant and say, tenant, normally we will not consider you because you are not a low risk, you're a medium. However, to show your good faith, because you cannot trust the guy that says, trust me, you show your good faith by paying for the Xpello services every month. So what will happen is either you can pay upfront the good faith certificate, it is issued, and it's there for the period. If we need to evict, we will then evict the tenant. Or the tenant can pay for it monthly for 250 and you purely add it to the lease agreement. So the tenant will pay for this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, then they get considered for the property. They are desperate. They want the unit. So you're giving them a solution how to get the unit. Whether it's paying an alleged increased rent or including this, it just shows their good faith. At the end of the period, if they did not default, Xpello will give them a reference letter. Sean, this is more important because we are realizing day by day, we can no longer rely on your landlord's references. Landlords are lying, or they're purely not getting information. Xpello have no reason to lie. So if you ever get a tenant with an Xpello reference letter, please contact us first to confirm that it's not fraudulent. And then you know that that tenant has not breached or kept to the agreement. If they go and buy, any of our panel attorneys will give them a discounted rate if they go buy a property. And I think the other big value for a tenant is an illegal eviction will not take place because we get involved and we mitigate and we manage the whole process. Nobody's going to come and lock the gates, cut the electricity or anything to that effect. And I think that is something that's also to great value to the tenants.
I agree totally. So that's the good faith certificate, which is the other way to do things. So there's various options one can do. Importantly, Elise does have a clause in her lease agreement. She has a clause that she can help you put into the mandate. Just a few questions. I'm just going to have a look here. There were 14 since I last looked, so let's have a look. Oh, Elise multitasks. I simply cannot. Did I hear correctly? Heidi said, I'm going to read them out in any case for the recording.
Okay.
Xpello will pay legal fees for the eviction. Yes, Xpello will pay all legal fees if an eviction is required. But 98% of the times, out of 100 LODs that they get CC'd in, only two of those will need to proceed to eviction. Their stats, their real life stats says. So they pay all the fees. Does that include sheriff costs, Elise?
So that we pay the sheriff to deliver all of the documents. If we get the eviction order and the sheriff has to go physically throw them out of the unit, we do not pay that fees. We usually get a quote, but Sean, up to now and up since 2017, 0.01% of our matters go that far because we have processes in place before a tenant, the sheriff has to go there. So we have our unique ways to motivate them before the sheriff goes.
Heidi then mentioned that that is great, but it sounds too good to be true. I'm mentioning that so I know it does, but please understand that that's why they work really, really, and that's why I explained, they pay the eviction, they pay their lawyers out of their money, the $250 a month that they get paid by the landlord. So that's incredibly important. That's why they stay afloat, because only 2 out of 100 end up having to go all that route. Sometimes they get much cheaper options like arranging moving costs for people, all sorts of situations, alternative accommodation. And I'm sure that Elise can provide, well, I can probably, if you contact me, provide you with Xpello clients who can attest to that. Because I know Xpello clients who can attest to that. Siobhan says if they do not provide their payslip to verify affordability, what does one do? You cannot verify affordability because above providing their payslip, Siobhan, if one of four applications has fraudulent documentations, there's a 25% chance once you've got a payslip, there's a 25% chance that that's not really a real payslip. I can show you many examples of those. I'm not going to go into that now. I can show you many examples of those. There's lots of examples I can give you of those. You must have the payslip and you must also call their employer, Google their number and call them on the Googled number, not on the number that gets provided, which may be a cell phone number. These are our responsibilities, I believe. So that should just answer that. Are the landlords required to pay back the legal fees is a question. I'm going to read this out, Elise. I hope you don't mind. But I think it's important for
No.
recording purposes. Are landlords required to pay back the legal fees? No. Landlords are not required to pay back legal fees. But the landlords must be Expello members. This service is only available to, let's call it members. I don't know if that's an acceptable word to you, Elise, but we're not allowed to call them insurance, so we have to call it something else. Only if they are Expello members. So that's probably where the catch is. The catch is they have to be an Expello member. That's as much of a catch as what it is. Will this Zoom meeting be available to us on email? I will discuss that with Elise at the end. The idea would be to make it available. I don't have any problems. We are public. At what point do you issue the letter of demand after the tenants have defaulted? I believe Expello's rule is, and I may or may, because the more you delay, the more the amount at stake can be. And I have an idea you have 5th of the month, am I right?
5 days after the letter of demand was due.
No,
After
it
payment
says
was
at what,
due.
sorry, it says at what point you issue the letter of demand.
Yeah. So ideally not later than 5 days after the rent was due.
Oh, the rent was due. Sorry.
Yeah, because as I've learned is, there's admin that has to take place. You send a letter of demand on day 2, it's just going to aggravate the relationship. So ideally day 5, not later than day 7.
Stembile has asked, is there a waiting period before Expello can start assisting a newly signed up landlord? Stembile, there's one of two ways. I know you're saying you're a newly signed up landlord, so this is a brand new tenant. As long as you have put the tenant through the normal vetting procedures, Expello will be happy to take on that tenant. And as for, Elise, is there a waiting period? I'm not aware of one.
So, no, Sean. Expello has no waiting period. So for new tenants, new lease agreements, that's why we assess the application. If we accept the application, we take the risk with you. We had instances where we accepted the application and the next month they didn't pay the rent and we had to evict. It happened. But we were with you to happy that they would have been a good tenant. If it's an existing tenant, we will only accept an application if the tenant has not breached, not just payment, any type of breach in the past 3 months. So if there's been no breach in the past 3 months, then we will accept them immediately and we only need the rental statement and the lease agreement. So we don't have a lot of documents that you have to submit. It's an easy, smooth process to register with us.
Yeah, so that's important for existing tenants. We often, when we're doing information sessions, which we've done from time to time, or we do from time to time, I just thought with the current stats, this was it was an opportune time to revisit this. We often get asked the question, if the tenant defaults now, can we join? No. I mean, that just simply doesn't make any sense. It's like saying, I've been diagnosed with cancer and calling Sanlam and saying, can I get one of those policies that cover me for cancer? But I've got it already. Everything works on a risk basis. And so we're working on average risks here, which means that there have to be other people that don't have problems. It's just the way life works. And I'm just putting that, well, maybe that's a bit blunt, sorry. It is just the way it is. There's another question. Let me just have a look. If they do not provide Okay, I think I've dealt with that. If they don't provide their pay slip to verify before viewing a property, what does one do? One can't proceed. I've received 3 months pay slip from a potential tenant, but the bank statements received don't reflect the salary paid into that account. So I have to ask for more bank statements so one can verify the salary? Definitely. Definitely. Um, Definitely. Once again, let's go back and you can explain this to tenants. You can explain this to tenants. You can quote me. I don't mind you quoting me. 1 out of 4, the most up-to-date stats I have, the most representative stats I have from somebody with a very, very large portfolio who has monitored these things specifically, is that 1 out of 4 applications, 1 out of 4, 25% of applications contain documents that are not genuine. Let's call it that. Documents that have been altered. Documents that paint a brighter picture. However you want to call it. And so it's thus incumbent on us. And you can say that in terms of your mandate. You're more than welcome to say to them that in terms of your mandate, your contractual agreement with the landlord, so that you're just the messenger here. Your hands are tied. That's a nice way to explain. My hands are tied. My mandate with the landlord requires me to do these checks. I am not willing to breach that mandate because I can be personally held responsible. That's another way to explain that. Does the 250 payment, payments by the landlord escalate yearly? As far as I know, your fees haven't increased over the last few years that I've known you. And
No,
that's at
Sean.
least
So
5 or so years.
yeah, so the fee will not be increasing. However, considering that the government will be increasing the VAT from 15 to 15.5%, of course, the fee will be going up with 0.5%. It's purely to come. So Expella is not increasing their fee, but the VAT is going to have an impact on the fee. So we're just waiting for confirmation whether they're now really proceeding with that or what is the case.
Oh,
But
yes,
there's going to
sorry,
be
that
no other fee
250,
increase. It's
250
inclusive of
includes
VAT.
VAT. It includes VAT.
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to say that. I don't do this VAT thing. I'm not registered because I don't need to. It's not that I'm flying anywhere secretly. So just to clarify that. There's another question. If one landlord has 10 cottages on his property, does he pay 10 times 250? Yes, he does, unless you're a member of our rental training club, in which case you get a discount. So if one landlord has got 10 properties, there's 10 leases that have a risk associated with it. Each lease, you can really put it that way, each lease has a risk associated to it. So it has to do with the leases that the landlord has because there's a higher risk. Roughly, what are the sheriff costs in Johannesburg, Elise? I'm sure you would know something.
Sean, this can vary anything between 5 and 20,000 Rand. Depends on where the property is situated, how big the property is situated, how many tenants. So anything between 5 and 20.
Okay, I just want to go back to one thing. If one landlord has 10 cottages on his property, does he pay 10 times 250 Rand? Yes, he does. And I've just remembered a calculation that I once did for Elise. I'm so helpful. Oopsie. My calculator won't move from my main screen. If we work on an average rental of 9,051, because that is what the current thing says. So if we look on an average rental of 9,051, oh no, yes, current rental of 9,051. And we say that the average, how much the average time to evict now? Did you
4
say?
months.
4 months.
Well,
Times that,
5 months, more or less, yeah.
times that by 5 months. That means that if the average rental is 9,051, the amount of losses the landlord will have potentially is 45,255. Okay. It's a large amount of money. This is average. This is not talking about your higher end rentals. Now, if you also think about that, and let's say the cost of an eviction starts at what's it, 40,000?
Average cost of an eviction is anything between 14 and 60 years.
Okay, so let's make it
If
50,000.
you're lucky, yeah, because these days the 40 was in the past. I think if you're lucky, you only pay 40.
Okay, so let's call it 50, and that's not including the sheriff.
Yes.
Okay, so the sheriff is how much on top of that?
Well, the sheriff's cost for just serving the documents I see average about 5,000 to 7,000 rand.
Yeah, but for kicking out, we're talking 16.
Well, let's say 15. Let's
Okay.
take an average.
Let's take 15. So the total there would be 50,000 rand. Where did that come from again?
The
five.
50,000 is the eviction. And the
Sorry, the
15
eviction plus the 60 plus the 15,000 gives you a total cost potentially to the landlord of 15,000. To get the eviction started, they need lawyers. Lawyers do care, but only when the money drops into the bank account. And I'm not being rude when I say that, but that's the reality of how life works. So you need to drop money. So the landlords are now 2 months out of pocket. They haven't received rental for 2 months. They have to pay a substantial deposit to the legal practitioner to start the process. So we have a cash flow issue. And that's normally when most landlords will just say, I can't afford it. Okay. 250 a month is more manageable. So even on that practical side. So then they have to come up with 15, 20,000, whatever, to initiate the process. Now, we're looking at a total of 65,000 that will be required totally when they're already out of pocket, and they're going to be potentially out of pocket for another 4 months. If you take that 65,000 and you divide it by the monthly fee, you get 260 months. And if we divide that by 5, why am I dividing it by 5? I suppose, sorry, I'm going to times it by 5 because I must divide it by 12. This is what happens when you do live TV. Divided by 12, you will see that the landlord would need to pay Expeller for 21.7 months, almost 22 months, almost 2 years, to spend the amount of money that they would have to come up with immediately, when they're already 2 months down, to initiate a process without Expeller. And I think that's another way that one explains this to the landlord. So I think that's important. Sorry. Let me just see, blah, blah, blah. Is there anything more there, Elise?
So Sean, I just want to add, so just on your calculation, and people know me, I'm not big on the calculations, but you actually have to pay out for 10 years to pay for half an eviction. It will take you 10 years for 250 rand to at least pay 30,000 rand. So that is just to help you with that calculation. What I see the questions are coming in, and I know we are almost over our time.
Yeah.
Please email me with your questions. I have a fantastic team.
You just go to that link.
Or you can go to the link. So Sean has given a link. If you're not comfortable with the link, I've given my email address. Please, you have to tell me that you're from here, because you get amazing benefits because you're coming through Sean's platform. Please tell me this, and me and my team will get all the information to you. Either I will give you a call, now my business partner, he's on the ball, he will give you a call. So we will give all the information, but we need to know that you were referred to us by Sean.
Yes, you certainly do. Yeah, so you can either email Elise, or there is a form. Commercial property question, yes, they do cover commercial.
And the nice thing about our commercial services, residential, we only do the eviction. Commercial, we do the eviction and ask for the money. So that's a very nice commercial summons that we do in the application we do in the High Court. Additional benefit, it's a bit more expensive. It's 300 Rand per month, but we will really share all of that information with you when you contact us.
And Elise, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for those questions, because the questions help elucidate and make things clear for other people. So I really, really do appreciate all of you. And I read the questions out on purpose for the recording purposes. I'll speak to Elise afterwards about the recording, but I don't think any of us have any problem making the recording available, because we are speaking publicly in any case. There's no secret here. So yes. So ladies and gentlemen, we thank you hugely. We hope and trust you stay well. We hope and trust you have a great week. And I think that's about it, Elise. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great and thank you for doing such an amazing job, sharing your knowledge with everybody out there.
You're most welcome. I hope something has been useful. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.